Hey everyone, thanks for joining for day 3 of the Agentforce series and continuing the learning spirit. And thank you, Gilda, for all the kind words and all the support that you provide. And thank you everyone for joining us today. And this is made possible in collaboration with Gilda, the amazing, and all the speakers of this series. And myself, Jyotsna Vitra. And here we are in the third day of the series. We have completed the Agentforce fundamentals and the data cloud with respect to the Agentforce. And then we have 4 more sessions, the best practices, practical applications about the architecture, and especially the one on the 11th of February, we do have the Ask Me Anything panel that is to help you with any questions that you want to have answered. And the last one is again by Jacob. It's executing Agentforce projects. So we do have a few more sessions which are going to have a lot of content packed with all the information for you. Make sure that you're registering to all of these sessions. The link will be the same. I will be sharing in the chat window shortly. And if you're wondering if where these sessions are all uploaded, we will be recording each and every session and we'll be uploading it to the YouTube channel at the rate MC Learning Camp. And any questions, please post them in the chat window, and any other confirmations or any other questions that you have after the session, post them on the Slack channel, mclearningcamp.com. And I will be sharing the link to the Ask Me Anything form. Please fill that form with your questions so the experts can answer them on the panel. And I'll be sharing the registration links as well. Make sure that you register to each and every session that I have shared before. There are 4 more sessions that are lined up. And here's a quick way to access that form. Here's the QR code. And again, this is on 11th of February, 8 a.m. Eastern. And we do have some exciting swag. Thanks to Gilda for coming up with the idea of this swag and helping us with this. So we do have some jackets and certification vouchers. So we are checking for the attendance and social participation. Please share on social what are the key learnings that after each session. So whatever that you're learning from this session, we are in the hope that people who are not able to attend the session will be able to learn from you what is about Agentforce and what are the key learnings from the session. And also if somebody is not yet aware, they will get to know and they will make use of this opportunity of these sessions. Please use the tags MC Learning Camp, Agentforce, and Movement Marketer. And thank you once again for joining this and continuing this journey. And Jacob and Christopher, thank you very much for being the speakers and then sharing all your insights. And you have been doing a lot of work behind the scenes to make sure that you're covering all the aspects. We really appreciate you and your involvement. And I will turn it over to you, Christopher and Jacob.
All right, thanks, JB. So let me share my screen and do the obligatory, does it look right? And can you see it?
Coming up.
You see the screen?
Yes.
Good.
All good.
And can everyone hear me? Also
yes,
good.
all good, Jacob. Yeah.
Perfect. All right. So then let's do on camera for a second. Say hello to everybody. So hello, I'm Jacob Hayes here with Chris. Chris and I will do an intro in a second, but like JB and Gilda said, really excited to do a technical deep dive today. You guys have one of the best coming to you with Chris. And Chris is really a fantastic resource. Chris and I are good friends, and he does amazing things at List Engage. So I'm excited to have him be a part of the session. We've already explained a thank you, but I thank you guys enough for joining. I have my 8-year-old, or sorry, my 8-year-old. I have my 4-year-old just outside my door looking at me, wondering why I'm talking at 8:06 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So I'm sure she will come in and maybe make a noise or two. Otherwise, I don't believe we're going to cover any forward-looking statements here, but there will be potential for forward-looking statements, especially given that Agentforce is a new product. And so one of the big things to keep your eye out, especially if you're customers on the call or potential customers on the call, is make your purchasing decisions based off what's generally available and not based off of what is on roadmap or not generally available yet. Okay, I did all the slides. So let's do a quick round of introductions. Jacob Hayes has been a part of a couple sessions so far in the series, and like JB mentioned, will be in a couple more later on. Senior manager at Accenture, been in the Salesforce ecosystem for over a decade. between Data Cloud, Marketing Cloud, and Marketing Cloud adjacent products, including Interaction Studio and Marketing Cloud personalization as it's morphed in the CDP platform as well. And so look forward to the session today and some more. So Chris, virtual mic over to you.
Thanks, Jacob. And so I'm Christopher Erslinger with from ListEngage. I'm a technical lead. I've been in the ecosystem for similarly about 10 years now. Similarly overlap in Marketing Cloud personalization, and Data Cloud being focuses, and now Agentforce as well. I lean more into the technical side, but yeah, great to be here.
Yeah. Cool. All right. So I'm going to go off camera because one, my 4-year-old is watching Disney Plus. And so if I don't do that, the streaming will be bad for her. And you don't want a 4-year-old mad about not being able to watch Bluey. And so I'm going to get off camera for a second. Then hopefully the bandwidth will stay good. Okay, cool. So let's dive into this thing. What do we want to cover today from a high level? Now, with the session, we want to cover more on you guys seeing the platform. Now, we'll be able to go through, if I look at most of the presentations that we do, we look at a 30,000 foot view, 10,000 foot view, 5,000 and 1,000 foot view. We're going to stay between 30 to 10, and Chris may go down into the 5,000 foot view into some of the pieces in the demo. But there's also going to be plenty of interesting technical sessions later on, not only in this series, but as well as in part 2 and part 3 of the series that JB and Gilda are working on. But what are we going to double click into in a couple of areas so you guys understand the foundations of what Chris will show you within the platform? That's Retrieval Augmented Generation, Einstein Data Library, Retrievers, and yes, I always include a dad joke if I can in any presentation. And number 4, Unified Knowledge. So let's dive into those real quickly, and then I hand the mic over to Chris. So if you guys were part of the first session of the, hey, what is Agentforce? You saw me bring up this high-level vision, which I explained it as Data Cloud's vision for enterprise architecture. Probably could have an updated title for the slide to say Data Cloud and Agentforce. How are those becoming the enterprise architectural vision for Salesforce? But the reason why I brought it up again today is I want us to focus on a couple of key areas as we look at how does Agentforce and these platforms work together? Because I think understanding the conceptual knowledge of the enterprise landscape when it comes to the Salesforce technology is critical for success. And so we're going to spend our time understanding how does unstructured or structured data not only leverage Data Cloud, but also how we can leverage unified knowledge and knowledge articles within the Salesforce platform itself. But how are we leveraging the RAG technology and vector search to be able to chunk, transcribe, and leverage the information that is not always housed in Salesforce? So a little bit of tidbit here is I actually had a conversation just this past week with a customer who has most, if not all, of their knowledge for their customer service agents, real physical agents, not virtual agents, living in external systems. And so one of the key components is they don't want to basically engineer all of those articles or store them all in Salesforce. They already have a repository of truth. So how can we leverage these? And then not only how we can leverage them, how do we start to chunk and put together the information in mini models? Data graphs is what we call it in Salesforce, to make sure that we have the processing speed correctly, but also how can we retrieve it in the right manner for an agent to leverage it? And that retrieval, we probably won't be able to go into all of these, but retrieval in the platform is SQL SOQL queries, which hopefully if you've been a core developer, if you worked in the core platform, you understand that. If you've been in the exact targeted marketing cloud space, we know SQL like the back of our hand, but SOQL is just another way to start leveraging the metadata within the CRM framework. Vector and hybrid search, we'll talk about that today. Prompt and flow retrievers, we'll talk a lot about retrievers today, as well as how can we leverage Apex and Flow. And again, the whole point of that is to provide our agents with the information that is either housed in Salesforce Core in our CRM or within Data Cloud. Hold on, my daughter is yelling at me. I kind of figured that she would interrupt me at some point. Okay, so let's dive into Retrieval Augmented Generation. So we talked a little bit about retrieval augmented generation in the past presentation, but we covered it at a very high level. Here, I want to go down a couple of double clicks into what is done and why are we looking at retrieval augmented generation as our little buzzword of the day within Salesforce, especially with Agentforce. Now, in a very simplistic manner, what we're doing when we're setting up RAG, and what you'll see with Chris showing in the demo with some clicks, and he'll walk you through the setup process, is how are we looking at structured and unstructured data on the left-hand side, leveraging not only our virtual bring your own lake, bring your own model capacities within Data Cloud, but also how are we leveraging this new thing from Zoomin, which if you're not aware of, Salesforce did make a purchase, and Chris will talk about that later in the slide deck as well. But not only how are we leveraging structured and unstructured data, how are we bringing it in to Data Cloud? Because if we talked about the first session, we really mentioned, again, Data Cloud is a linchpin to Agentforce. It has to be leveraged in some capacity if you really want to get the most out of the product. Now, you could always, like we talked about before, leverage articles and pieces that are in your CRM instance, but Data Cloud gives you that next oomph into leveraging the right information. And apparently leveraging is my word of the day. I don't know why, so we'll just go with it. What happens when we bring in that data? Well, when we ingest it, we have to map it to DMOs, data model objects, or UDMOs. Or UDMOs, which is unstructured data model objects. And then from there, we have to vectorize that data. So we have to create a search index to configure and chunk it. And that chunk is basically creating coded data behind the scenes of that article or unstructured information. And I'll show you what that coded information looks like. But at the end of the day, that search index that we create is stored in Data Cloud and leveraged by the platform. So step 2, when a lot of that is pretty much clicks within the platform, as well as data preparation outside of the Salesforce platform. Within step 2, we're looking at 3 main pieces: retrieving the data, how do we augment it, and then how do we generate? Shocking, I did retrieval augmented generation in the slide itself. So when we look at retrieve, there's no code retrievers that we'll go into a little bit more detail here in a few minutes, but there's also SQL that we're able to leverage to pull out the right information. And Chris will talk about it. We might not be able to show every component of this within the platform, but we'll do some high-level discussions. Augmenting, I mean, outside of stating the obvious, we're trying to provide our prompts more information about what our customers or what zero and first party data we have about them to provide a better experience for the end state customer or for the end state individual internally who's leveraging the prompts and our agents themselves. And then finally, how are we going to invoke that template? Can we invoke it from an Agentforce agent itself? So just within, the 4 walls of the topics and pieces that we covered in the first session? Can we leverage Apex, Flow, or API? And then a tidbit here is Flow is going to be your best friend. So if you haven't learned it yet, especially for the marketers in the room, spend some time. It's going to be critical in our future. We talked about search indexes, at least at a high level in that first step, but there's 2 ways that these search indexes are created, and we leverage, vector search and hybrid search within the platform. And again, I don't want to take too much time away from Chris, but if we look at the left-hand side, vector search or semantic search is how we call it, is truly just walking through this piece. But the whole reason why I included the output image below is to make it simple. You're chunking your information, the PDF or unstructured data, and you're providing us a score and an output that allows us to say what is the right, basically, piece of content we should use in the flow of the agent working with the platform or working with the end state customer. Hybrid search is merging and ranking it. So how are we leveraging the actual scores that we put together along with a hybrid score, a keyword score, a vector score to, again, provide the right context to our prompt and our individual. All right, good. So we're going to breeze through this. I'll keep an eye out on, questions and comments in the chat as we go. But the next phase of what we're going to walk through is Einstein data libraries. So before I dive into this, Einstein data libraries, you'll actually find this within the platform, and Chris will show it in setup. One of the key components of this is where we're going to be adding that unstructured data to the platform. And what I wanted to show with the next couple of slides is what actually is created during this process out of the box within the platform. And so we're going to look at this in two ways, files and data libraries. In the file-based data libraries, here's what we're looking at behind the scenes, what's occurring when we're adding these items into the platform. So on the left-hand side, you have two different data libraries, and those two different data libraries can be different files. And those files could be, I don't know, some unstructured data in file 1, 2, and 3, and it could be even structured data in data library 2. But what's created is that DLO. So the AL grounding file reference is our DLO, which is our data lake object that's consuming the information. It's then passed through to an AI grounding file reference DMO, which is then leveraging RAG file UDMO, if you're following the pattern, to look at either the chunking or the indexing of the information. One of the key pieces of information here for everyone to know is there's a reason why I'm putting little lines around each one of these little squares. In its current state right now of Agentforce, an agent can only use one data library, and it cannot leverage multiple data libraries for one single agent. So you have to be very calculated and understanding what you're going to be using for the right end state agent aligned to a use case. Because at the moment, there are some limitations or constraints. The other piece is, if we look at file-based data libraries, this one's even simpler, but what's going on behind the scenes? Well, if you're using knowledge out of the box within Salesforce, the knowledge KAV object, along with data category group, and knowledge data category selection, those are all mapped over via the out-of-box object model when we're working through the DLO to DMO process. And then again, we're leveraging a couple of more objects that are chunking, indexing, and again, our retrievers, which we'll cover retrievers in a second. So again, laying the landscape here for Chris to show you all some information. All right. Again, I can't resist a good joke. Whenever the first time someone said retrievers, I was like, oh, good. We're going to talk about the good boy, which is a beautiful golden retriever. But no, sadly, we're not talking about the fluffy, goodest of voice. Instead, we're talking about how are we pulling the right information from all of the pieces that we've talked about before and leveraging it or augmenting our prompts, which you see in steps 7 and 4. This probably could be its own session, this image, which if you haven't seen it, go into the Salesforce Architects blog, or is this Salesforce Developers blog. They walk through how is the platform working between Data Cloud, Agentforce, and Core for knowledge, and how is Salesforce leveraging this internally? It's a really good article about that. I'll pass it into the group after the session. But again, high level, what's a retriever? Now, without me reading all the words on the screen to you, again, we're trying to return relevant information from our vector database. And we want to make sure that we're giving the end state user who's going to get the response back from the agent the right value and relevance for what they're asking for. And you can see specific examples of the RAG file, knowledge, etc. on the screen here. But there are 3 main types of retrievers that we can build within the platform. There's the default retrievers that are created throughout that process that we talked about. They're automatically created, and you cannot customize these, which they have their usage, especially if you're looking at simplistic articles and components in the platform. Most of the time, you'll start doing and leveraging custom retrievers, which those are going to be able to help you customize your search indexes, as well as they're often designed to help with multi-purpose search indexes and use cases. And you can see in the example image in the middle of this piece, the difference between your filters and how it's designed from a custom to a default is you then have your metadata structure behind the scenes or your actual identifiers. Finally, with dynamic is, I think, the most interesting, but it's also not the right fit for every use case. We might be able to show this in the presentation today, but I think Chris might have to talk about it at a high level. But at the end of the day, it's a default placeholder. And what is it doing? It's specifying at runtime, what do we need? In this specific example image, which might be a little small, is how are we looking at the right knowledge article via the dynamic retriever to give me, again, the right context as I ask a specific question to my agent. Because at the end of the day, we want the agent to say the right thing to an individual. All right. That was very high level, some of the knowledge pieces, and no pun intended, but Chris, handing it over to you to talk about unified knowledge.
Awesome. Thanks, Jacob. And so Unified Knowledge, for those of you that were not aware, recently acquired by Zoomin just in the past few months, is kind of this piece that's going to allow answering knowledge articles and all of this RAG use cases that are now super important in agents to be able to be taken advantage of without having people migrate all of their current knowledge bases and all of their work into Salesforce manually. So Zoomin as a product has a ton of features for collecting external tool products. And that can be S3 buckets, that can be a Google folder, that can be public-facing websites where they have a web crawler to crawl through and find your data that way and store it into knowledge articles, as well as external Salesforce instances. So if you have a separate CRM separate from where you're doing your agents and you need to collect that information for your agent, you could grab those knowledge articles externally as well as another 10, 15 integrations that they've built out to pull all of this information and take with the purpose of taking those external, bringing it internal so that it can be brought into Data Cloud so that we can use RAG on it and we can actually use this in the agent and have the agent be able to take advantage of the data you already have in other places. And if you want to hop to the next slide, awesome. And so I guess that probably should have a little sooner, but that's all right. So inside the tool, you can go in and you can set up different sources. The real value to unified knowledge is that this is not a one-time input, but rather these sources are constantly refreshed. And so if you use the sitemap tool, there is a crawler that would run over your pages and you can tell it how often your pages get refreshed, and it will automatically update your knowledge articles. If you're using the sources for a Google folder or S3 bucket, it will constantly check those buckets, and anytime new articles are updated or new articles come in, it will take those and transform them into your knowledge articles on site. And so I think from here, I think the next we're going to dive into is actually just kind of seeing some of this on the platform. And so I think I will take over from Jacob right now. And I will hop out of our deck and I will jump into Salesforce tool. So right now I have unified knowledge. I guess we'll work backwards into what we were working with before. And you can see here that if we go to add a source, there is a ton of options here. And so you can set up these sources very quickly. I'll showcase right now going through and kind of setting up a sitemap. And so on your public-facing websites, you're taking advantage of SEO. You have a public-facing XML sitemap, which is just a list of your pages and how often they get refreshed and what, so that Google can scrape them. We can take advantage of that, and just by placing your public URL. And so if you did like sitemaps.org, actually I don't have the full URL, but there's we can pull up a sitemap XML, test the credentials, make sure that it's a public-facing site and that it is in the correct format. And then go through and kind of give it just a couple pieces of information to tell what articles we want to, what pages we want to be converted into articles. And so for those articles, depending, we can determine if you want to reference the external source. So the URL for the article can be the external source, or you can have it be the internal knowledge article that Salesforce generates. You have the ability to set up sitemap regular expressions. So you can use regex to determine which ones you actually want to pull in. So if you have your sitemap covering all of your website, there might be large portions of your site that you want to ignore. And so you can use regular expressions, use your regex, grab just, English US sites, grab just FAQ sites, so that you're not generating, thousands of articles if you have this really large website. And then we have some additional filtering that we can do for what we want to ingest this against. And so it's not pre-filling, so that's okay. But we can
Christopher, quick interruption. Can you zoom in a bit?
absolutely. And so just before what I was looking at, the site credentials, and then site users agents going through content. I'm just gonna zoom out a little bit. Sorry, working on a laptop. And then you can set up your data mapping. What type of knowledge fields do you want this data to actually fill into? What type of record? You can add data categories. You can determine languages. Out of the box, there's a functionality that it will look at the content and actually map it to the specific languages. You can turn on multilingual support and tell which languages you actually care about. And you can also set what audience you want these articles to be mapped to. So they can be public facing, they can be internal, and all these you can handle so that you can just dedicate these articles without impacting any of your current work streams and knowledge articles. So if you have internal service reps that are currently using knowledge articles, we can make sure that these are just public facing ones for the agent and not interfere with your current stack. But we have a lot of flexibility here. And so this was just one of the options that Unified Knowledge has. As I said before, there's quite a few of these here that you can play around with and pull your data from. So almost any type of external source you have right now, we can take that, bring it into knowledge articles from there.
Chris.
And so, yes.
1 second here before you dive any further. We had a couple of good questions come in the chat. So one is, do these articles live within Data Cloud in the DMO, or are they S objects? Do you mind taking that answer?
Absolutely. So I'm just going to move the bar so I can switch tabs. These will be written into knowledge articles, which all knowledge articles can then be brought into Data Cloud for that. But by default, this is just bringing it into knowledge articles, the CRM object knowledge articles. Knowledge articles can be then referenced inside of Data Cloud and can be brought into Data Cloud. But by default, they're just being stored as knowledge articles.
And so then to add the second piece there, we're not really leveraging S objects anymore with our construction and our new methods of working here with Data Cloud and Agentforce. Not that S objects are obsolete, but in our world, they don't have as much power, especially with some of the automation capabilities. And so that's where we're really leveraging Data Cloud in the future. So now that's one piece, but we can always unpack that a little bit further. So Chris, one more question for you. So do you need Zoom and Unified Knowledge for a sitemap construction that you were showing?
So yes, to be able to pull sitemap for a crawler to grab that and drop it into that. Now you could create a custom Apex class and flow to bring stuff in, or if you had an external API, you could push stuff in. But to actually use the Unified Knowledge to pull information from a sitemap and drop it into knowledge articles, you do need to get provisioned Unified Knowledge, which is previously known as Zimin.
All right. Thanks, Chris.
Awesome. Yeah. And so we can take a quick look. These are mostly just articles that come out of the box when you do like a partner SDO. And so they're related to like Cumulus and the example sites. But if we had a collection of knowledge articles, you could go to the knowledge object and you can see them all go through. And you can see that some of them are in different languages, different information. And so I could just kind of quickly, not the greatest one to select it, but see that this information exists. We have this inside of our instance. And so we could double click into this and do kind of that full flow to setting up RAG, which would be bringing that data in, mapping it, doing the vectorization, all that stuff. Or as we talked about before, we can just use Einstein data libraries, and that will do all of that for us. And that will get us the data prepared the way that we actually directly want. And so if we hop over to Einstein data libraries, we can kind of show this pretty quickly. If I just create a new library, and I just give it a name. Oh, I already have one named that. Cool. We can kind of take a look at what we can do here. And so, as Jacob touched on before, an Einstein data library has to be mapped to one type of data source. So we have the two different toggleable options here is either knowledge articles, or we can do a file upload. And so you could drop your files here and you could do a collection of files, or we could go through and filter on knowledge articles. And so out of the box, there's two very powerful settings that we have. Use public knowledge articles, so we can flag just only reference articles that are public facing. That way, if this is a public facing agent, you don't have to worry about internal documents being shared. And then we can even go farther and filter on data categories and only do a very specific group of articles. In our setup, we set up identifying fields that the AI is going to use to actually determine which articles to find when someone asks a question, as well as additional content fields that are part of our knowledge articles that should be referenced. And so you could include the URL name and title and summary and make sure that it can return back that information as well. So we can set up a data Einstein library. And if we were to do that, that would automatically do all of those steps that we talked about before to actually setting up RAG. And so if we clicked into Data Cloud and we looked at our data models, we would see that all of those different Einstein libraries would exist here as data model objects. And so we can see like the knowledge, all records and fields defaults that gets created out of the box, and the demo chunks and the demo indexes, and it's just building that all of us for it. We can take a quick look at I guess Data Explorer and just take a quick look at that information inside of Data Cloud. And so I will just grab the all articles, and we can kind of just see all of those articles that we had over here are now actually in Data Cloud and indexed in the ways that all that information can be pulled out.
So Chris, one question here, which was a good one in the chat, is what does the refresh schedule look like for the articles in the Einstein libraries? Does it have to be manually refreshed, or is there a process there?
And so to refresh the articles, that's taking advantage of unified knowledge. And unified knowledge's processes, I believe, are daily. They run daily to check and refresh those. I believe if you're doing like the sitemap example, it will reference in the sitemap how often those pages are expected to be refreshed and change some of the cadences there as well. But I believe it's just daily for most of the feeds. They may vary for some of the individual third-party tools, and you can check the documentation inside of Zoomin for your specific use case. So like if you're looking at S3 buckets or a Zendesk integration, I think they vary depending on each one of those. But generally, I think it is a daily.
Thanks, Chris. And then I think the one thing that I will talk about forward-looking statements, I'm glad I did slide in, is in the future as Agentforce is moving forward in its construction and design, the thought process there is to have that be more of a consistent refresh feed to what Chris is talking about, because again, that is why Salesforce bought Zoomin for these purposes. And so it's not supposed to be either manual refreshes or daily refreshes. They are working on an increased speed there. All right, Chris, back to you.
Awesome. And so we saw the data inside of Data Cloud, and then we can also just look at those retrievers that are automatically created. And so if I go into Einstein Studio and I go into retrievers, I can see that all of my different data libraries all have corresponding retrievers that were built out to them. And so if we look at the kind of the default all records, all fields, we can see that retriever. We can see the query template is every component of that nicely collected. We can see that nice by default by score descending limit 10. So it's taking the highest score, 10 scores for the ones that have the closest matches to those things. But yeah, so all of that nice and easy when we are able to take advantage of Einstein data libraries. Obviously, those two limitations are that they have to either be knowledge articles or they have to be manually uploaded. I think for the purposes of live today, when you refer to both of those things, they have to be text only. They do not support PDFs and images and stuff. Obviously, that's something that's being worked on right now to be integrated as well. But if you have a use case where you have to specifically reference a PDF or an image, you will have to create all these manually and to do all of the retrievers and stuff yourself and not take advantage of data libraries. Einstein data libraries also today do not work with companion orgs in Data Cloud. So if you have Data Cloud 1 and you have multiple orgs connected to a single Data Cloud, you are not able to take advantage of Einstein data libraries today. That is something that is on the roadmap from Salesforce. So hopefully that comes very soon and no longer have to have that caveat, but just mentioning that right now. And so we see the data. We've looked at it inside. We can take a quick look at out of the box. There is the answer questions with knowledge, both agent action and prompt. And so again, just we can take advantage of that one, and that is that dynamic prompt that is going to use the dynamic retriever, sorry, for Einstein search. And you could modify this to your needs if there's manipulation that you need for your specific use case, or you could build a completely custom prompt and a complete action. But out of the box, this is prepared for you. It works really well with Einstein data libraries as they are set up. And we can click into the agent action that actually uses that. So if we go to, in our setup, we go to our agent actions, there is the out of the box answer questions with knowledge one. Now there is no customization that you can really do with this, but outside of refreshing the data source, you can make sure that it was last indexed at a time that, since you made changes, but can't make changes to this, the out of the box version, but it works directly with Einstein data libraries. If you have a custom solution, you would just create a custom version of this and you would copy kind of the same similar flow and output. But this agent action is already set up when you get Agentforce. And so if we go into agents, we can click into an agent, open the builder for it. And we can see, we look at the topic, you can see the one
Chris,
that
do you mind
has
zooming in just a tiny
absolutely.
bit? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, too much. I'm not that blind. But this that's about my blindness level. Okay, good.
Perfect. And so you know, we have the agent action hooked up to this topic. And while you're inside of the agent, you can go over onto the tab for data libraries. And so here I will pull out a little bit just to kind of show all of it. One of the limitations that we've talked about as of right now is that you can only have one data library associated with an agent. In the future, it might be possible to add multiples and have different rules linked into them. But for right now, you are limited to the fact of just one. You can see that same settings that you saw inside of your Einstein data library setup, and you can make explicit changes to this one. So if you had multiple agents using the same library, you could make individual changes here, as well as there is the show sources. So you can actually have the agent return back explicitly what knowledge article this came from. If it has the external URLs for that, you can have it link out to that so that if a user gets a response, you can see their source and they can investigate further if they feel the need. But from there, we can just kind of take a look at how this looks for those who haven't seen it before. And so we know that we have this collection of knowledge articles that we'd expect the AI to be trained off of. So I could ask a question about like devices reduce battery life. And so if I switch over to the agent, I can do my conversation preview and can do it is not charging well anymore. You can see what it says. And so I'm just going to move the zoom bar. And so after it goes through its loading, it goes through its steps. It is provided an example of an article for charging issues, as well as an additional article there. But we can see over in the session information, that the action answer questions with knowledge was invoked. It took the query for battery not charging well, which is the piece of information it parsed out of this context. And this is the summary that was returned back from that information. So I think we'll stop the demo there to make sure that we still have some time for Q&A as well.
Well, we had
Yeah.
a couple of questions, Chris. Yeah, I think
Thank you.
if you could leave your screen up because we might want to show it. So there were a couple of questions that came through. I was going to save them for the Q&A, but I think we can jump into some of them right now and then do a couple pieces in a second. So I think one of the good ones that were asked internally, not that there are any bad questions, sorry, I really need to drink my coffee, is should Zoomin be connected to Data Cloud through a connector for indexing? And how should this be leveraged? Do you mind taking that first, Chris? And if you need me to, I can double click into it.
Yeah. And so the connection into Data Cloud is your connection of setting up your data library. So that is where that data model gets created and all that information. Zoomin itself just creates the knowledge articles.
So hopefully,
yeah.
Hopefully that answered the question, because there might be a secondary piece. But if there's a secondary question for it, feel free to ask it in the reply, and we can do the QA. And there was another question here, Chris, is there any general precautions or items that we should be aware of when we're working with importing articles and data via Einstein data libraries? Anything that the individuals should be aware of as they start to work with this platform?
Yes. So very important caveat today, there is no way to stop some knowledge articles from being brought in. When you integrate knowledge articles, all knowledge articles will be brought into Data Cloud. And then from there, you have the ability to filter which articles the agent has access to and will look at. And so we have, if we remember in the knowledge settings, we can filter by data categories, and we can make sure that our information is properly tagged so that, the only things that this can answer questions on are ones that are flagged as solar power or something like that. As well as the, use public knowledge articles there. So you can have that extra filters, and if you have other custom tags you can filter on as well. But you are going to bring all of your information from knowledge articles into Data Cloud. And so if you're bringing this from multiple sources and things like that, you want to make sure that you are aware of that.
All right. And then another good question that came through is, and hopefully I got this right. So the questioner was asking, good to show the knowledge articles and the manual upload of files, but can someone leverage files that are attached to Lightning records? And I think they believe, Ali asked the second question here is, I think, Salesforce files. I don't know if that's supported, but Chris, do you know if it's supported currently?
So not by Einstein data libraries, but okay. If you upload those, you could create your own custom retrievers as long as that data is pushed into and indexed inside of Data Cloud, right? So that doesn't work out of the box with the Einstein data libraries, but you can build out custom RAG by pushing the data into Data Cloud, creating those indexes, and then creating custom retrievers for it.
Perfect. Thanks, Chris. We'll save the rest of the questions that are coming in. Good questions coming in for the Q&A. So Chris, do you want to jump back in? You can run the presentation or you can hand it back to me. Doesn't matter, either way.
Sure. If you want to take over, that's fine.
Cool. I'll take it. All right. Can everyone re-see my screen? My side says it's looking right. Chris, good?
Yep, looks great.
Cool. Okay, so we did leave a couple of other slides here at the end. I don't know if we're going to cover them today, just based off time. But we did have a high-level process for retrieving content via vector search, basically out of the box, as well as a process leveraging Agentforce Apex flows and vector search. I don't know, Chris, do you want to cover this real quick, or because I think there were a couple of questions on the custom route. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this ties right back into what was just asked. Einstein data libraries today only work on knowledge articles and manual uploads, but that's not the only limitations inside of that's not a limitation inside of Agentforce. Agentforce you can build out custom flows that reference custom objects that go into a prompt template that you can then either use retrievers that you've set up to pull out those vector search data, or you could write a custom Apex invoke, which then you could do any customization. You're not limited to what retrievers can handle, right? We know all the flexibility of both flows and Apex classes. The combination of those two can really cover pretty much any use case. You're just limited by actually making it yourself. And so, yeah, I mean, we have these two slides. They kind of walk around a little bit more closely, but I think that's just a really high level. So I don't know if we want to.
Yeah, we can move on from here. Okay, so let's bring it all together before we dive into any additional Q&A that's coming through in the chat. How do we look at bringing this all together in 4 main columns or categories here is, I think the first piece is please go get hands-on. It's even difficult for me sometimes. I live in the world where I'm a mixture of an enterprise architect and solution architect. And so getting my hands dirty, I don't get to do it as much as I probably should. But between the self-service workshop, which we have a link, as well as what's available on Trailhead, start going in and clicking. And it sounds funny when you think about it that way, but you'll be able to build your knowledge and understanding of these platforms, even if you on client, if you're with a specific customer, if you're not using it internally within Salesforce, or if you're with a partner, you're not leveraging it currently in projects. It's good to be aware of this, as the ecosystem is moving into an interesting pivotal shift, I would say, very soon. The second column, I always say stay inquisitive. And one of my biggest pieces for being inquisitive is not only within the 4 walls of Salesforce, but also what's happening out in the industry when it comes to agentic. And how is agentic architecture being done, not only within Salesforce, but within other platforms. It'll make you much more well-rounded and understanding. And again, if you're a partner on the call, you'll be able to answer some interesting questions about how are others in the industry doing this. Or it'll also help you better understand where Salesforce is going with its construction of Data Cloud and Agentforce together. If you're more of a visual learner, get inspired with the Decoded series. They're actually really, really good. And that comes across as like, well, does that mean other things aren't very good, Jacob? No, I just think the Salesforce developers team and the developer advocates team that is working on these pieces are doing a really good job of doing short how-tos of where are we leveraging Agentforce, not to completely rip out a full process for a customer, but how is it going to help with a touch point or 2 within a 10-step process to make our lives more efficient and help with the productivity gains. So take a look at some of those videos. And then finally, my public service announcement for the day is don't shy away. I'm trying to say this as nicely as possible. There's a lot of people who will love to say negative things in the industry, regardless of the technology choice, but try to block out some of that noise and say, where do you think you could leverage Agentforce in the future in Data Cloud? And where does it potentially not fit as you work with your customers or work specifically with brands and clients? Don't be discouraged because of the fun, negative nature of the world. Try to be a little bit more of a positive light there. Sorry, that was definitely Jacob pulling out a soapbox, but one of the things that I think is very important. Okay, so with that, pretty much on time. So let's do a live Q&A via items that are still left in the chat. And so, Chris, I'm going to ask you some questions and I'll answer some questions too. So, good question in the chat was, how can we investigate which knowledge article was considered while fetching the response? Chris, do you mind talking about this? And if you want to show something, I can always give you a screen share. But do you mind just hitting on this at a high level?
Yes. And so when it comes to inside of the agent builder, in the tool, you will only see the winning article, and that reference there. But when you can go into Data Cloud and then go into Einstein Studio and pull up the retrievers that are used in that data library. And when you do those simulations, you can see the results that come back, and you would see the top 10 highest scoring results, and you'd be able to see those articles specifically there. When you're actually inside of Agent Builder, you only get the winner, but you have that option that you can double click into the retrievers and see those results.
Thanks, Chris. I think we have another question going your way is to ensure the output is grounded with, in this specific example, is website data. Apart from zoom in, can we integrate directly with website XML or converted JSON? And then a secondary part of that is what is best practice and easily maintainable? Do you mind just hitting on that for a second? Because I know we talked about that together.
Yeah, so the power of zoom in is that it is a web crawler that is connected to Salesforce and allows us to refresh that information at automated intervals. If you built out some type of solution not inside of Salesforce where your website got updated and it pushed an API call into Data Cloud or into the CRM to activate a flow that writes to a knowledge article, you could have your knowledge articles or your Data Cloud data refreshed that way. But when it comes to inside of Salesforce, how do you refresh those articles in real time, like at automated processes? That's what unified knowledge and zoom in is for. Why can't you just reference just XML or something like that? For RAG to work, it does need to be indexed and vectorized, indexed, chunked, and all of that has to happen inside of Data Cloud. And so that the records do have to actually be in Data Cloud for us to use RAG, for us to update the prompts in real time and actually pull that information without it to fully ground the questions.
Yep, it's a good one. All right, Julie asked a really good question. I'm calling Julie out by name. Hi, Julie. Is bringing in all knowledge articles, what's the main implication? Is it cost? Is it speed? So Chris, I think we'll do this together. My first pass at the answer there, Julie, is I think you hit on it with cost and speed. If you have your knowledge articles within the Salesforce four walls, it's quicker and easier to leverage them within prompts or call towards them with either less apex or less prompts or less complex prompts if the articles live within Salesforce. Cost perspective, that's a determination that is really needed. So there's a couple of things that I've seen at least in that you won't have to bring all of your articles into the Data Cloud, four walls itself, but how can we leverage, to Chris's last point there, RAG and vector, which is embedded into Data Cloud. And in the world of Salesforce, that's what we have to leverage, at least within these processes. Now, we have plenty of clients, at least from my side, who don't leverage this technology in Salesforce, but it does make the process of what I'm calling agentic mesh architecture between different systems much more difficult. So probably gave you the best consultant speak to a question ever, but cost speed, it depends, question mark, but we can always unpack it. Chris, anything I missed there from your side?
So I actually do not know if the number of knowledge articles that it's crawling over impacts the amount of Einstein credits. And so I think it actually might, but I don't know for sure. I don't want to say that and it's not true. So there might be a cost as well that increasing the number of articles that we are generating a score off of RAG might increase utilization costs there. There are the data cloud costs of having all of that stored and updated and pulled in. But I don't actually know the implications on the Einstein credit utilization, which is the other component of Agentforce utilization costs.
Yep, it's a good question, Julie. All right, we have another question here, Chris, which may come your way. If search is matching with a different language than what's being asked by agent, what language answer is returned? Is it original as a knowledge article, or is it the specific agent language? That's a really good question. Do you want to take it first, and then I'll add color?
So I believe the agent's response will be in the language that the user is interacting with, since the LLM will summarize it in that language. I'd love to hear any additional information that you can support there, Jacob.
Yeah, I mean, and this is a really good one. I know there's back and forth been a lot of questions internally in the community as well as with product about language support and how to context switch between language as individuals, to Chris's point, are using the language of choice when interacting with an agent, and as well as how can agents themselves transverse between multiple languages. So I don't think there's a best answer here yet, and we're a little bit figuring it out as a community as Agentforce goes, obviously, as continues to have more and more individuals use it in production environments and as the platform grows itself. So that's why I said good question. Maybe let's bring it to the Ask Me Anything piece later in the series, and I'll do some digging along with Gilda and some other folks to see if we can go a little bit further into language support and then language context switching. But good question. So there was another question in the chat, pre-built agents for Commerce Cloud. This is where, again, keep your forward-looking statement slide readily available for Jacob's statements here is, yes, it's on the roadmap. I do not know when those are GA or live. And Chris, if you hear anything I'm saying incorrectly, feel free to correct me. But I know it's on their roadmap to release Commerce Cloud agents within the platform. Anything I missed there, Chris, or no?
No, I just know that it's on roadmap. I don't know timelines or
Cool.
particular timelines. Yeah.
Yes. All right. And then can Agentforce help in the media industry? Yes. And similar statement on the roadmap is agents for specific industry clouds, or, in my world, I deal a lot with financial services, media cloud, etc. So I've dealt with most, if not all of them. It's on the roadmap. Don't know when. All right, but with that, I think that is all of the questions, at least we can handle in today's session. So JB, hand the virtual mic back to you to close us out.
An awesome session, Jacob and Christopher, and thank you for covering all the questions. And thank you, Jacob, for covering, for doing the double role, the speaker and the moderator as well. Thank you both, and thanks everyone for this session, for joining this session. We'll be sharing the recording soon, and as I see many questions about the presentation, we'll try our best to share the slide deck. If I share on every video, it will be added as a link on the description of the video. Any questions if you have after the session, or anything that you have lingering, post it on the Ask Me Anything panel form. I will share the link in the Slack channel as well, so you can go and fill it up. So anything else, any feedback or suggestions, let us know in the Slack community. Thanks, everyone. Have a good one, and see you again next Thursday. Bye.
Thank you all. Have a good day.
Bye.